So, some of you may not know this, but I'm an absolute horror nut, a horror nerd even. I love everything spoopy, be it shows, movies, video games, and books. So you can imagine my surprise and my hype when I learned that HBO was releasing a live-action adaptation of the action horror game The Last of Us. Now, this isn't the first time we've spoken about The Last of Us show on this channel. Click the eye above to see the first video we did. Today, though, I want to talk about episode 2 of The Last of Us. Specifically, though, on that museum scene, which fans of the game know all about, and how HBO made The Last of Us into a real horror experience. As always, if you enjoyed the video, learned something new, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Let's just get right into the spooky goodness, shall we? So, The Last of Us video game, a zombie adventure action horror game, with the horror part very much coming in the last there. The Last of Us is not really what I would call a conventional horror game. Its action survival gameplay and its focus on the human story definitely outweigh the scariness of being chased by a horde of zombies, or possibly being forced to sneak past a group of the horrifying clickers, the Last of Us creepy, blind, murderish, mushroom head zombies. No, The Last of Us, while being sometimes scary and definitely thrill-inducing, is not really what I would label a traditional horror game or a traditional horror experience. However, though, you can imagine my surprise when in episode 2 of The Last of Us, HBO's live-action series, we witnessed a classic display of horror cinema in arguably one of the most iconic and scariest scenes from the entire video game. Like we said at the top of the video, fans of The Last of Us game know exactly which scene I'm referring to here. That museum scene, which introduces the game's most iconic creatures with that blood-curdling sound, the clickers. Much of episode 2 of The Last of Us is the setup for the reveal of these clickers. We follow Joel, Tess, and Ellie as they make their way through the streets of Boston, navigating what they believe is the safest path to avoid the clusters of infected. At one point, Ellie muses that there's no infected around them, saying this is nothing like the stories that she heard about the outside world in school. Of course, as she's making this joke, we hear a strange cry from a monster in the distance, our first teaser that something else is lurking out in this dead city. So earlier on in the episode, the group made their way into a flooded hotel. Ellie's acting like the dorky child that she is when suddenly we are treated with a baby jump scare of a dead skeleton. This is a classic horror tactic, the old bait and switch. As well, the writers are priming the audience for spooky events to come. By doing these bait and switches and these little teasers and these creepy moments, they're priming your brain to be on high alert, raising the tension and the suspense just overall throughout the scenes. With the group of infected spread out, Joel and Tess are forced to take Ellie through an old museum. A way that they used to take, but they stopped as the museum had become a haven for infected over the years. They make their way through this dilapidated museum, stumbling on a body that had been severely destroyed by some unknown creature. Ellie remarks that she's never seen an infected do anything like that to a person, again teasing the reveal of these clickers and just overall enhancing the tension in this moment. It's then that it happens, a strange creature's cry, followed by that classic clicking sound. You hear them before you see them, further adding to the suspense. Also, side note, I love that they use the actual clicker audio straight from the game. It's just the little things you know that make The Last of Us show just so good so far. We begin seeing shots of the clicker, just random angles of it, continuously teasing the reveal of just how these things look in the face, as Joel and the others are trying to hide from the creature, until finally it comes around the corner and Ellie is unable to control her fears as she lets out a gasp. The creature alerted to their attention. Remember, they are blind, but they have really good adept hearing. These scenes were just so good, man. And from a horror buff perspective, infinitely times better than this whole sequence and this whole little level of the museum within the video game. But necessarily, it's going to be, seeing as it is film media. It's the nature of the medium. With film, we can use fast cuts, quickly shifting perspective from person to person. We see the horror on Ellie's face, the panic on Tess, the worry on Joel's. This is just something we can't do as easily in video games, especially from the perspective of this action-adventure game like The Last of Us, which mainly is from an over-the-shoulder kind of third-person perspective. So without the use of cutscenes, it's really hard in the video game to create this same sense of tension, at least not as easily. I really love this shot here of Ellie crawling underneath the desk as our three heroes are split up from one another by the clickers. And this scene here where Joel is trying to silently reload as the clicker stalks him from around the corner. The entire time, the camera slowly zooming in on Joel, the clicker leaving our line of sight. As it does so, the sounds of the clicker slowly fading away, until suddenly the clicks come back, louder now though. As the camera zooms out, the monster is right next to Joel's head. This is some top tier horror cinema techniques on display right here. Personally though, I would have loved it if it was even closer and we got a little jump scare here at this scene. But overall, just in general, throughout this museum sequences, it was just done so well. The way that Joel and Ellie hide and move behind cover together is just some shit straight from the video game. The fact that Joel is the one to step on the glass here in this scene and attract the clicker after it was Ellie who originally alerted them, it's just good stuff, man. A ton of payoff for over an episode and a half of hype and tension that is building up towards the reveal of these monsters, the clickers. And ultimately how these scenes lead to the tragic sacrifice of Tess and the epic quest that Joel and Ellie must now embark on together. Side note, I just want to say I love what they did with Tess in the show. Overall, I think what I've enjoyed most so far about The Last of Us, the HBO show, is the fleshing out of several characters, whether it was Sarah from the first episode or Tess from the second. The Last of Us show, in my opinion, has done an amazing job of building upon the blocks of lore and story that the game gave us, but also it fills in the blanks and adds creative flourishes and detail to further expand the story and lore for the film. So far, I've been extremely pleasantly surprised with The Last of Us. They've both done an amazing job, keeping to the themes in the story set by the game down to some of the most iconic music even, while still being able to elaborate and further expand on the world and the story without butchering it. That's a fine line to tread, as we've seen from the many failed adaptations of video games and just any previous source material that has been converted to film. As always, guys, if you enjoyed the video or learned something new, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Do you agree with me? Do you think The Last of Us HBO show has finally earned the genre of the horror tag? Do you think that HBO made The Last of Us into a real horror experience? Let me know in the comments down below. As always, guys, I hope to see you in the next one. Stay safe out there. Until next time, peace, love, auto.
Wasn't supposed to happen, so much talk around us. We became numb to the yapping. It was like 05, got my license to drive. Picked you up in my pop's car, went for a ride. Couldn't no one tell us nothing. That night was ours. All the stars aligned and you were so damn fine. Yeah, it was young love, young hearts were so pure. We trust love is so